Cyrus Merritt was 40 years old, and the sentence his wife whispered into her phone on a Thursday evening in November, "He will never find out. He is too busy staring at his screens," was the last miscalculation she made in their marriage. She had not been wrong about the screens. The 4 monitors in Cyrus's home office ran 22 hours a day and showed, among other things, a real-time view of every device connected to their home network, every traffic pattern moving through their router, and a rolling 90-day activity log. He had built that monitoring setup when they moved into the house 6 years before, using equipment from his firm and a rack he assembled himself in the corner of the office. Monica had looked at it once, called it sci-fi, and never once asked what it actually monitored. What it monitored, among other things, was everything that came through their network. Merritt Cyber Group operated 11 federal and corporate security contracts from an office in Charlotte's Uptown district. The firm's annual revenue was $3.2 million. Cyrus had founded it 9 years before the marriage, structured it through a trust his attorney had established, and never discussed its full financial scope with Monica because Monica had never asked. What Monica had whispered to Derek Calloway on that Thursday evening was not a fact about Cyrus's awareness. It was a statement about what she believed the screens were for. She had no idea what the screens were actually for. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The hum of the monitoring rack was the first sound Cyrus registered each morning, a low, steady tone that had become, over 6 years, as unremarkable as the particular quality of the light through the east window or the sound of the house settling in the cold. He arrived at his home office before 5:30 and sat in the chair in front of the 4 monitors and reviewed the overnight activity logs the way other men reviewed the morning news. The rack itself was a 2-unit assembly in the corner of the office, managed switch, next-generation firewall, monitoring appliance, and a logging server with retention capacity for 6 months of network activity. He had built it from enterprise equipment on a weekend after they moved in. Monica had come to the doorway once while he was setting it up, watched for a moment, said it looked like something from a film, and gone back to unpacking the kitchen. She had never asked about it again. He had never brought it up. He had not built it for her to understand. He had built it because he did not know how to live inside a network he did not manage. His father, Gerald Merritt, had been a senior electronics engineer at a defense contractor in Northern Virginia for 30 years, a man who understood information systems at the level of signal and sequence, who had taught Cyrus to wire a circuit board at 9 and to read a network diagram at 14. He had died of a coronary event at 71, 2 years after Cyrus founded the firm, and Cyrus still heard his voice most clearly at the monitors in the early morning. He used to say, in the patient voice of a man who had spent his career tracing faults through systems that did not advertise their problems, "Every signal leaves a record, son. The question is whether anyone is paying close enough attention to read it." Merritt Cyber Group had 11 full-time staff, a client roster spanning federal compliance contracts, corporate network security assessments, and incident response services across the Southeast. The firm had been built on that same principle, that security was not reactive but observational, that the most valuable protection was the kind already in place before anyone thought to circumvent it. He and Monica had been married 8 years. They had met at a Charlotte technology industry conference. She was a marketing director for a medical devices company, articulate and socially precise, with the quality of moving through rooms she did not know as though she had always been expected in them. He had admired that. In the first years, she had asked about his work with genuine engagement, what the firm's threat models covered, how incident response was structured, what it meant to hold a client's security architecture in trust. He had appreciated that quality of interest. He had believed for a long time that it was affection. He understood later that it had also been an assessment, the same assessment she applied to every room she entered, deciding what was there, whether it served her purposes, and how to hold it correctly. In the 5th year, she had stopped asking about his work entirely. In the 6th, she had begun to describe it at social gatherings with a mild, practiced deprecation. "He stares at computers all day," she would say, laughing. And the laugh was always slightly longer than the comment warranted. He had noted it. He had attributed it to restlessness and not looked closer until he had reason to. His secondary phone, registered to the firm's administrative account, stayed in the inner pocket of his jacket on the hook behind the office door. Monica had never asked about it in 8 years of marriage. She had never asked what the rack monitored, what the firm's annual revenue was, what the trust structure was designed to protect, or what it meant to have spent a career building systems that recorded everything that moved through them. She was about to find out what it meant. That Thursday evening in November, reviewing a client log at the monitors, Cyrus noticed a device in the routing table that was not in his household device inventory. He leaned forward. He pulled the device's connection history from the logging server. The device had a corporate endpoint profile, the kind of managed hardware that companies issued to employees, with a manufacturer fingerprint distinct from consumer electronics. It was not Monica's phone, not any device registered to either of them. Its first connection to their home network had occurred 8 months prior. It had connected 14 times in total. The most recent connection, last Tuesday, between 3:17 and 6:44 in the afternoon, during a window when Monica had told Cyrus she was attending a marketing workshop in Midtown. His hands did not shake. His face remained perfectly calm. He cross-referenced the 14 connection timestamps against Monica's stated schedule for those dates. 8 of the 14 aligned with times she had described commitments that had taken her out of the house for portions of the day. The device had not connected from a nearby vehicle or from a neighboring address. It had connected from inside their home, within range of the interior access points he had installed, and whose coverage geometry he knew precisely. He moved with the same deliberate calm that defined all of his work. He did not pursue the device's owner that evening. He did not need to in order to understand what the device's presence in his home on 14 separate occasions, coordinated with his wife's stated schedule, meant. He cross-referenced the 14 connection timestamps against Monica's stated schedule for those dates. 8 of the 14 aligned with times she had described commitments that had taken her out of the house for portions of the day, a client meeting, a gym class, a late errand she had mentioned in passing. But the device had not connected from a nearby vehicle or from a neighboring address. It had connected from inside their home, within range of the interior access points he had installed, and whose coverage geometry he knew precisely. The device had been inside their house during all 14 events. During 8 of those events, Monica had told Cyrus she was somewhere else. He noted this in a fresh document. He noted it without commentary, the way he noted technical findings in client reports, what the data showed, and when. What he needed next was in the cloud storage account. Cyrus had created a household cloud account for joint financial management, bills, insurance documents, tax records, 6 years before. Monica had been added as a secondary user. In September, when Monica had upgraded her device, she had configured her new phone's automatic backup settings and had directed the backup to the household account rather than to her personal account. An error, he determined later, of a type that occurred when a user toggled the wrong destination in a settings menu without reviewing the full configuration. The backup had been running to the joint account for 11 weeks. He opened the account dashboard and found a folder of automatically synchronized messaging threads that had not been there before September. He opened the folder. He read what was sufficient to understand the timeline, the nature, and the full duration of what the messages described. 8 months. The 14 connection events in the router log aligned with the date and time metadata in the synchronized messages. He did not read further than was necessary. He closed the folder. He opened a new folder on his secure desktop drive. He named it simply Monica. He printed the connection log from the logging server, a record generated by his own equipment on his own property, documenting activity on a network he owned and administered. He printed the cloud account synchronization manifest, showing the date, source, and destination of each backup event, a record from an account he had created, whose primary credentials were his, and to which Monica had been granted secondary access 5 years prior. He placed both documents in a folder alongside 5 months of joint bank statements, showing $19,400 transferred from a joint savings account to a personal account Monica had opened without his knowledge, moved in amounts between $400 and $1,800 over 7 months. He cross-referenced the transfer dates against the message timestamps. 12 of the 19 transfers occurred within 48 hours of a corresponding date in the synchronized thread. He built the picture the way he built every forensic record, not through inference or assumption, but through the incremental accumulation of what was already there, waiting to be read by someone with the discipline to look. He picked up his phone. He called Iris Holloway. He said, "I need an appointment. I have documentation." She said, "Monday morning, 8 o'clock. Every signal leaves a record. The question is whether anyone is paying close enough attention to read it." He had been paying close enough attention for 20 years. Iris Holloway practiced family law from an office on East Trade Street, a building she had occupied for 18 years. A practice that had been built on the specific quality of not being surprised by the gap between what people believed and what the documentation showed. She reviewed the Monica folder on Monday morning with the focused efficiency of a professional confirming what the materials had already made plain. She set the folder down. The prenuptial agreement covers the firm as a premarital asset. In full, she said. The trust structure was established before the marriage and has been maintained properly throughout. She has no claim on Merit Cyber Group or any of its subsidiaries. She turned a page. The unauthorized transfers are recoverable. The marital home divides at equity. Joint accounts divide net of the recoverable amount. She paused. "I want to review the discovery documentation sources with you." The connection log, Cyrus said, is generated by network monitoring equipment I own, installed on property I own, recording activity on a network I manage. It is the equivalent of a security camera recording activity in one's own home. And the account backup is from a cloud account I created, whose primary credentials are mine, to which Monica was granted secondary access 5 years ago. She directed her device to synchronize to that account rather than her personal account. The content came to me because I am the primary account holder. I did not access her device. I did not access any account whose credentials were not mine. The content came to me through the synchronization process she configured. Iris noted this carefully. "The documentation is legally obtained," she said. "Both sources." She looked at him. "Her representation will likely characterize it differently. Be prepared for that specific argument." "I am," he said. He drove to his uncle's house in Noda 2 days later. Curtis Merritt, his father's younger brother, who had spent 30 years managing enterprise network infrastructure for a Charlotte financial firm, and who had helped Cyrus spec the home monitoring rack in the month after the house closed. Curtis listened from his chair with the stillness of a man who had spent 30 years diagnosing systems and had learned that the first step was always to stop moving and let the problem speak. When Cyrus finished, Curtis said, "I noticed it at Christmas 2 years ago. He said it with the quiet of someone who had been holding the observation without a container for it. The way she talked about your work, like it was something you did to fill time, like she had decided what it was without looking at what it actually did. He shook his head slowly. She walked past that rack every day, never asked what it monitored, never asked what the firm actually handled. Some people see the light on the equipment and assume it's decoration. He looked at Cyrus with the direct attention of a man who had known him since childhood. Your father used to say the most revealing thing about a person was what they didn't notice, what they walked past every day and never thought to ask about. He said it meant they had already decided the world was smaller than it actually was. He paused. 8 years of that rack running in the corner of your office. She never once asked what it recorded. He drove back and spent the afternoon building the complete forensic package, organized, annotated, with a chain of custody note on each item identifying its source and the basis for its collection. The package ran to 51 pages. He applied the same documentation standard he used for federal incident response engagements, because the situation deserved no less rigor than any other matter he had ever handled professionally. During that afternoon, he also identified the corporate device with more specificity, cross-referencing the manufacturer profile and connection timestamps against public business directories for companies operating in the Charlotte area, had narrowed the device class to a specific category of enterprise endpoint. A regional technology company in the South Park corridor issued that class of hardware to its sales staff. A search of that company's publicly accessible employee listings identified a sales executive whose name Monica had mentioned once, 7 months prior, as a professional contact from a networking event. Cyrus documented the finding in the package with its source noted, and its connection to the other documented evidence made explicit. He did not pursue the identity further. It was not a variable that changed the factual core of what had been established. The documentation was already sufficient. That Wednesday evening he came home, made dinner, and sat across from Monica, while she described her week with the even attentiveness of a woman who had not yet understood that the ground had shifted beneath her. She had been to a client presentation in Ballantyne. She was thinking about a strategic repositioning of her firm's branding approach. She asked about New Year's plans. He answered each question with the steady, present calm he had always brought to conversations that required him to see what was in front of him, without the interference of what he wished it were instead. She had no idea that 51 pages had been filed that afternoon. He thanked her for dinner. He went to his office and sat at the monitors. The equipment rack hummed in the corner. Every indicator was exactly where it belonged. Preparation was the work. The documentation was already done. The mediation was scheduled for the second Wednesday of January at Iris's office on East Trade Street, a conference room that had absorbed the weight of many proceedings without comment, and whose north-facing light fell on the table in a way that flattered no one and illuminated everything. Monica arrived with her attorney, Andrew Sims, a family law practitioner with a reputation for high-asset proceedings, who had submitted a preliminary financial discovery request indicating that Monica's side expected a significant marital estate to negotiate with. He was prepared and professional. The issue was not his preparation. The issue was what the documents actually said. Cyrus placed the documentation package at the center of the table himself, 51 pages, tabbed by section, with a 1-page source summary at the front identifying each document's origin, method of collection, and admissibility basis. He had learned, in 20 years of technical and legal work, that the clearest argument was the one that left no procedural gaps for someone to climb through. Iris walked through the package in sequence. The prenuptial agreement, dated 9 years before the marriage. The trust documentation and firm incorporation records showing Merit Cyber Group's consistent ownership and valuation as a premarital asset. The joint account statements showing $19,400 in unauthorized transfers over 7 months, annotated by date and amount. The cloud account backup manifest, with the account creation record and the secondary user authorization dated 5 years prior. And the network connection log, annotated with the equipment ownership and installation documentation, showing 14 connection events from an unregistered corporate device over 8 months, cross-referenced against Monica's stated schedule. Andrew Sims reviewed the cloud account structure. He reviewed the equipment ownership documentation. He reviewed the connection log and the annotation establishing that the monitoring hardware was Cyrus's property. He made a note. He made another note. He set his pen down. He said, "We'll need a moment." Monica and Sims spoke briefly in the corner of the room. When they returned, Monica looked at the connection log on the table. She said, "You monitored my phone." Cyrus said, "I monitored my network. The messages, synchronized to my account," he said. "The account I created. The account whose primary credentials belong to me. You configured your device to back up to that account. The content arrived in my account through the process you established." He said it without heat, without the slightest variation in his register, in the way a man states a technical fact that is not subject to interpretation. "I did not access your phone. I did not access any device or account that was not mine to access." Sims looked at Iris. Iris produced a 1-page legal summary she had prepared for precisely this exchange and set it in the center of the table without comment. Sims read it. He read the first half of it again. He set it down with the deliberate care of someone who has just confirmed that the argument he had been preparing is not the argument the room requires. He made a note on his legal pad. He crossed it out. He said to Monica, quietly, "We accept the positions on both source documents." Monica looked at the table for a long moment. She looked at the rack annotation, the diagram of the home network that was, by every legal measure, Cyrus's infrastructure, and something in her bearing shifted from the composed attention of someone running a proceeding to the stillness of someone who has finished running it. She said, "Cyrus, I made a mistake." He looked at her with the complete settled calm of a man who had processed the full accounting of the situation before he walked into the room and had nothing left to sort through in it. He said, "Every signal leaves a record. I built my entire career on that principle. I learned it from my father, and I have never once worked by any other standard." He picked up his folder. "I monitored what was mine. I documented what the records showed. That is all I have ever done." He stood. He buttoned his jacket. "I'm not angry. I'm clear. Those are different things." He walked out of the conference room and did not look back. And the door settled closed behind him with the particular quiet of a system that had been running correctly the entire time, and had simply been asked to produce its log. 9 months later, Cyrus Merritt signed a 2-year federal cybersecurity audit contract for a regional infrastructure agency, a $2.8 million engagement referred through a federal contractor whose network incident he had resolved 3 years prior. He signed it on a Tuesday morning at his South Tryon Street office with 11 employees in the building around him, on the same desk where he had first reviewed the overnight connection log the previous November. The divorce had settled in March, per the prenuptial terms. Monica received her portion of the marital home equity and the contents of her personal accounts. She received nothing from the trust, nothing from the firm's contract revenue, and no interest in Merritt Cyber Group. Sims had submitted a challenge to the admissibility of the network log on privacy grounds, citing a theory that home network monitoring constituted unauthorized surveillance. Iris's response had been 5 pages. It cited 3 applicable federal cases and 2 state decisions. The challenge was withdrawn the following Monday morning without a hearing. The sales executive, whose corporate device had connected to Cyrus's home network 14 times over 8 months, had been placed on administrative leave by his employer in February. After the connection log became part of the divorce proceedings' public record and appeared in a Charlotte business publication's summary of the case. His employer's compliance team had reviewed the filing as a matter of standard protocol. The professional consequences that followed were his employer's determination to make, not Cyrus's. Monica relocated to the South End and took a marketing director role at a hospitality group. Cyrus heard this through a mutual acquaintance who mentioned it once. He had nothing remaining in that account. He had met Petra at a federal digital forensics conference in Raleigh 4 months after the filing, an analyst at an incident response firm who had asked him, in their first conversation, whether he had considered a specific approach to log correlation that was measurably more efficient than his own current method. He had told her directly that it was better. She had appeared to find this a reasonable response. They had been building something carefully for 6 months. One morning in November, Cyrus arrived at his home office before first light and sat at the 4 monitors in the steady hum of the rack he had assembled himself on a weekend 6 years ago. And he looked at the overnight logs in the quiet of the room, and he thought about his father at a workbench in Northern Virginia, tracing a fault through a system with the patient certainty of a man who understood that the signal was never lost, only waiting for someone who had learned how to look for it. Every signal leaves a record, son. The question is whether anyone is paying close enough attention to read it. He opened the day's first log. The rack hummed behind him, steady and untroubled, doing exactly what it had always done. He was free. He was documented. He was paying attention. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.